Okay, so today we're going to talk about writing a letter, and in particular, what we think about rhetorically when we write a letter, and from that point of view of the rhetorical situation. We're not necessarily going to talk so much about how to be persuasive or what you do persuasively, thinking about ethos, pathos, and logos as a writer, but we are going to talk about how do you analyze the situation of writing and set out to write a letter. So we're going to start with, a reason for writing. We read in our class the editorial "College Isn't for Everyone" by W.J. Reeves, and we did some rhetorical analysis of that. Now let's be straight right off the bat. That's a very old editorial. I love using it because it's hilarious and the guy's offensive and all that other stuff. But we can't really write a letter about that because it's so old. And be letting W.J. Reeves know what we think about him today is probably not going to do a whole lot of good. So this is just a situation of we're using to help us think about the conditions of a letter. But what did we find out when we rhetorically analyzed W.J. Reeves? Well, the dude likes himself. He thinks his old school ethos is more persuasive than it is. He talks about his experiences and why they're so meaningful, and he thinks it's persuasive. He's also illogical. His evidence often doesn't prove the points that he wants to prove or persuade us in any way. If you think about the evidence that he uses and the points that he's making there, it often doesn't make much sense, and sometimes he's just plain wrong. And the dude uses pathos like a machine gun. Most of his essay plays on his own resentment of students, the anger he wants to elicit in parents, and the trolling he wants to do of people who like education, like maybe you and me. So he is intentionally making us feel things as he writes this. You know, the dude's an asshole. He's racist, classist, elitist. He is a troll. This is a trolling editorial before the internet had message boards and Instagrams and Twitters on which you could be a troll. He was perfecting that long before that. And then what's shocking about this essay is that the dude might hold a middle ground position. It's published by the USA Today. It was read at breakfast tables all across the country. So we read this essay. We've done some deep rhetorical analysis of it, and we're starting to feel some things. And we want to write about what we feel about college, or what we feel about community college, what we feel about the opportunity of school. So we've got to think about what is our call to write. What is making us want to write something meaningful here? Well, we want to have an idea that we want to share. We want to find out something or know something or establish a clear idea, a piece of knowledge for us. We want to respond to another person. We have an argument. We want to demand a response. We want something, or we're going to support something or somebody or something. So there are many reasons why we set out to write a letter. W.J. Reeves gives us a few. Maybe we want to argue with him, or maybe we want to persuade others that community colleges are much more than just dumping grounds for bad students. Or maybe we want to show that college education is something for everybody and not just the elite few who can afford to go to an Ivy League school. We have a call to write. After we discover that call to write, we want to figure out, to whom are we going to write? And that's a complicated question. Often when we write, if we say, "Dear W.J. Reeves," we've got a single solitary audience. But if we're writing a letter for a larger audience, an extended audience, then we have to understand that other people are going to read that letter. We also have to think about whether our audience is limited or unlimited. So if we are writing to um, a board of trustees at a school, that's a very limited audience, even if we are doing an open letter to that board of trustees. If we are writing a letter to the Detroit Free Press, we have an unlimited audience. That letter could go anywhere, even if we have a very singular primary audience that we're writing to. You have to consider what effect you want to have in your letter, to whom you're writing, and who are all the different audiences you might affect. That also goes along with the idea that Some of your audience members may be hostile to you. Some of your audience members may be on your side. Some of your audience members may not know anything that you're talking about. So you have to consider how you're persuading all those different people. What are your conditions of writing? This is another thing we're going to have to consider as we set out to write. That is, what are the conditions that are going to affect us? Is this a required piece of writing we're doing, or is it voluntary? And required here is a tricky notion. Somebody's telling you to write a letter, or you are required just by your own code of ethics to write a letter, or it's voluntary. You don't have anything better to do. You want to write a letter, or you feel like this is the best way to talk to somebody. We have to think about whether or not our letters are casual or official. That is, are we writing this as just kind of like something we want to write and put out there, or are we expecting an official tone and official response to what we're writing? We're thinking about, is it a one-to-one letter or a group letter? Is it a singular author or a multiple author, a singular audience or a multiple audience? You have to think about whether it's also a personal letter or a business letter. How well do you know the people that you're writing? How much of yourself are you using in this? Or how professional is your tone going to be? And then we also have to think about the social and cultural conditions behind our writing. Who are we? Who are they? What is what are the rules of contact within this letter? I use the example here of the Declaration of Independence. And if you've never read the Declaration of Independence, I sometimes assign it because it is actually a beautiful piece of writing, and it's kind of amazing the way that the Franklin and Adams and Jefferson was the primary writer, how they brought about this letter to say something meaningful as a statement not only to a king of England, but also to a people who were trying to find an identity. As we set out to write, we have to consider, what is our authority? What is our position? Who are we as the authors? Is our letter going to be based on experience? It's experiential. Is it going to be professional? Your professional opinion through the professional experience you developed, or is it going to be expert? Because you are an expert in the field or expert on the topic. Are we going to be using lots of feelings, or are we going to be using lots of reason, or are we going to be using lots of data? That goes to the ethos, pathos, logos idea. Are we going to be using ourself as an authority? Is it going to be a reputation-based letter because of people know who you are, or are you using your credentials? What you can point to is saying, I'm the boss, and here's why. Your authority or position, what you know, how you know it, and how you use what people know about you is important for the ways that you write your letter. If you are writing on a topic you have no knowledge about, you have to ask, why are you writing that letter? Buffy needs to talk to us for a moment. The next question we have to ask is, in what genre or modality are we going to write? So where are we going to post this thing? How is it being written? The picture here is of Martin Luther, the first one, nailing his thoughts on a church door on what it means to have a church, what it means to have a God. And in particular, this was an important moment for the separation from the Catholic Church and the establishment of a church outside of the Catholic Church, on why it's his rationale for those. And Martin Luther left his office at a seminary, walked across the street to a church, and nailed it to the church door as a public statement for why he believed we needed to be able to form separate churches. When we are thinking about the genre or modality, you have to think, am I going to write a personal letter? Is it an email? Is it a public letter? Is it a letter to the editor? A campaign letter? Is it going to be a social media post, a blog post, a literary letter? And here you might think about James Baldwin's letter to his nephew. While that's a personal letter, it's also a public letter. He wrote it to be read by the public, not just his nephew. It's also a literary letter. He is using some real literary devices in that letter to bring his meaning about. After you've considered what type of letter you're writing, or what the style that type, where you're going to post your letter, you have to think about what is your style or your tone. Do you want to be informative, careful, kindly, angry, sarcastic, poetic, political, authoritative? There are many other styles or tones you could use here. Um, but you do want to think about what is it that you're trying to compose here to have your readers read. What are they expecting? What kind of tone are you going to use? How are you going to use your tone to affect them in ways that they don't expect? The last thing we want to think about is, of course, what do you want to say? And here I don't have any bullet points or any other points to add here, other than if you don't have something to say, you don't have a reason to write a letter. Your letter that you're writing for this assignment is asking you to say something. It's asking you to say it based on your rhetorical analysis, giving you some authority to write this letter, but you got to figure out what you want to say. What do you want to say? And why is it essential for you to say it? This nailing down the primary point behind an active writing is a task that we all have to learn how to do, especially after high school, where often we didn't really think about why we were doing it or what we wanted to say with it. We just wrote because somebody told us to. In this letter, for this assignment, and in most of the writing that you're going to do for college, you really have to ask, what do you want to say? We'll talk more next week.